Please unmute and ask the question. Yes, please. If there's no question, can we start?
I think Bismillah can start.
Yes, sir.
Yes, sir. Okay. Like yesterday, we entered the world of endocrine physiology, and the pattern of learning was to have its basic aspects first, and then building the story of applied or clinical physiology, especially from diagnostic and abnormalities or disorders of each of the endocrine glands. And we talked about the general principles of endocrinology, which are common to all. And then we switched on to systemic endocrinology, and we discussed hypothalamus as a neuroendocrine organ. And then we discussed in detail the endocrinology of anterior pituitary gland, switching on to posterior pituitary gland, and then endocrine physiology of the thyroid gland. Today we are going in these 2-hour session, we are going to cover 3 topics, that is endocrinology of the parathyroid gland, of the endocrine pancreas, and of the adrenal medulla. So these 3 topics will be done, inshallah, today. The parathyroid gland, as you all know, there are 2 paired or 4 located on the posterior surface of the thyroid gland. If you look at the histology in the lower column of this slide, it comprises of mainly chief cells, which are mainly located on the periphery, and there are auxiliary cells. So parathyroid hormone, or PTH, is secreted from the chief cells or the principal cells of the parathyroid gland. Now, what does it do? It is a mineralogenic hormone. If we look at the mineralogenic hormone, which are the mineralogenic hormones? Which means which are the hormones for which the primary biological activity is related with mineral metabolism. First is PTH and calcitonin. So PTH and calcitonin and vitamin D3, these 3 hormones, they have got homeostasis of calcium, phosphate, and magnesium. Whereas aldosterone is another mineralogenic hormone which is concerned with metabolism of or dealing with sodium, bicarbonate, chloride, hydrogen ion homeostasis. So sodium, potassium, chloride, bicarbonate, hydrogen ion homeostasis is carried out by aldosterone, and calcium, phosphate, and magnesium homeostasis in the plasma is brought about by calcitonin, by PTH, and by vitamin D3. Where is calcium present in the body? We all know calcium, phosphate, and magnesium is mainly present in the bones, in the teeth, in the cartilages, like in the muscles, in the stroma, and in the connective tissues of the body. And which is the main source of calcium? The main source of calcium is milk and milk products. Milk is a poor source of iron, but milk is an excellent source of calcium. So in which, how much is the plasma calcium, and in which form calcium is present in the plasma? As you can see the slide, 9.6 milligram per deciliter is the plasma total calcium level. Out of this 9.6, 4.6 milligram per deciliter is in the ionized form or ionic form. When we write down capital C, small a plus 2, that is the valency. So that means ionic form of the calcium. And then is protein bound is 4.4, and unidentified and complex is 0.6 milligram. So that means more than half of the calcium circulates in the plasma in ionic form or ionized form. And please mind, it is the ionized form or ionic form of the calcium which is biologically active. In old days, total calcium need was estimated, but now it is getting obsolete. Now it is ionic form of the calcium. When we write down ionized capital C, small a, and write down 2 valency, 2 plus valency on top of that, that is the ionic form of the calcium, because it is the ionized form of the calcium and not the total calcium which determines hypo or hypercalcemic features. So always advise the patients to get the ionized calcium in the plasma. Now it is responsible for bone, teeth, and cartilages, which are the bone, teeth, and cartilages cells. There are 3 cells. One are osteoblasts. Osteoblasts are bone forming cells. So that means bone regeneration, generation and regeneration, and bone forming cells are called as osteoblasts. So osteoblastic activity is bone forming activity. When they become aging, the aged bone cells are called as osteocytes. And when osteocytes are formed, so calcium is demineralized. So now the cells become very porous, and they are called as osteoclast cells. So osteoclast cells are bone resorbing cells. At one time, there is a balance between osteoblast cells and osteoclast cells to maintain extracellular fluid calcium within the normal range, that is ionic 4.6 milligram per deciliter. Now, PTH is a peptide hormone, so it exerts its physiological action through cyclic AMP system. So PTH acts through cyclic AMP system. Where are its receptors located? Its receptors are located on the bone cells, on the small intestine cells, and in the renal tubule. On the bone cells, under influence of cyclic AMP, it removes calcium from the bone cells and phosphate as well. So calcium and phosphate, they are mobilized from the bone cells and they go to the extracellular fluid pool. So when there is over hyperparathyroidism, so the bones become porous in nature. And then this PTH causes activation of vitamin D to vitamin D3. Vitamin D is formed in the skin in response to ultraviolet sun rays, but it is activated to its active form, vitamin D3, in the kidney, in the skin, and in the liver, and in the small intestine. So in the small intestine, so this PTH converts cholecalciferol, that is the vitamin D, into vitamin D3, and biochemical name of vitamin D3 is 1,25-dihydroxycholecalciferol. So this activated form of vitamin D, or vitamin D3, then absorbs calcium from the small intestine to the extracellular fluid pool. And then this PTH through cyclic AMP system causes increased reabsorption of calcium from the renal tubules and increased tubular secretion of phosphate in the urine. So the net result of PTH is it causes hypercalcemia and increased excretion of phosphate in the urine. So then the question arises, how is calcium homeostasis maintained? How is calcium secretion regulated or controlled within the normal range? So there are 2 main hormones responsible for it. One is the thyroid gland. As we discussed yesterday, C cells or parafollicular cells of the thyroid gland secrete a protein hormone called as calcitonin. And chief cells or the principal cells of the parathyroid gland secrete PTH hormone. When the stimulus is fall in calcium level in the plasma, as shown in the upper left column of the slide, so it stimulates the chief or principal cells to secrete PTH from the parathyroid glands. So then it causes release of calcium from the bone cells, and causes increased reabsorption of calcium into the renal tubule and decreased reabsorption of phosphate from the renal tubule. And then it activates vitamin D to vitamin D3, its active form, which causes increased absorption of calcium from the gut. So the net result is there is increased calcium in the plasma. Now look at the right upper column of the slide. If there is rise of calcium level in the plasma, that acts as a stimulus for the C cells of the parathyroid gland to secrete a protein hormone, calcitonin. Calcitonin, through the general circulation and through cyclic AMP system, it discourages release of calcium from the plasma. It tries to retain calcium within the bone cells, and it causes excretion of phosphate and calcium from the renal tubule, and it causes a decreased absorption of calcium from the gut. So the net result is there is decreased calcium in the plasma. So depending on the ionized plasma calcium level, so there is change in rate of secretion of PTH and calcitonin to maintain calcium homeostasis. The action of both, they occur simultaneously, but overall action of parathyroid, they predominate over calcitonin. So parathyroid hormone is an osteoclastic, it stimulates osteoclastic activity, and calcitonin stimulates osteoblastic activity. Now let us put this basic knowledge of the parathyroid gland into applied or clinical physiology. Disorders of parathyroid hormone. Hyposecretion of PTH. Hyposecretion of PTH would lead to tetany. Now, what is tetany? Tetany is conversions, like the conversions of some parts of the body. Now, tetany could be generalized, where all the muscles of the body become in a tetanic stage, or it could be localized, that is one group of muscles is tetanic, the rest are normal. And there could be latent tetany. Tetany is not apparent, but when the patient is exposed to stressful situation, like if you tap the facial nerve just in front of the tragus of the ear in a patient, it will show twitching of the muscles of the same side of the face, and this twitching could irradiate to the other side of the face. Or if you apply a blood pressure equipment that is sphygmomanometer and increase the mercury level, in the sphygmomanometer with the arterial occlusion, like there may be twitching of muscles of the arm of the same side, and the stitching would irradiate to the other side of the arm, right? And then, now why this twitching occurs? How hypocalcemia leads to this tetanic features or twitching or convulsion-like features. So that is, if there's hypocalcemia, there's gushing in, there's rapid influx of sodium ions from ECF to ICF, from extracellular fluid to intracellular fluid compartment. So sodium gushes in, rapid influx in the intracellular compartment. So there are exaggerated depolarization waves induced by hypocalcemia, and then it leads to tetanic features. And tetanic features, the most prominent sign is called as Strauss-Yaz sign or carpopedal spasm, or what is called as obstetrician's hand. Strauss-Yaz was the name of the discoverer. So there is hyperextension at the metacarpophalangeal and interphalangeal joint, and there is adduction of the thumb. And this type of the hand posture is used by the obstetricians to engage the head of the baby at the time of parturition for the baby birth. So carpopedal spasm, that is spasm in the muscles of corpus and tarsus, and Strauss-Yaz sign or obstetrician's hand is the common form of the tetany induced by hypocalcemia. And then there is hypersecretion of PTH. Hypersecretion of PTH could be primary or secondary. Primary hyperparathyroidism, the worst form of primary hyperthyroidism, is called as osteitis fibrosa cystica. Now let us see pathophysiology of primary hyperparathyroidism. This was a study in about some patients. Now, what are the features of primary hyperparathyroidism in terms of order? Weakness of the muscles, fatigability, renal colic, loss of weight, menstrual disturbances, diastolic hypertension, constipation, epigastric pain, bone pains, and then is documented ulcer, gout, paresthesia, and so many other features may develop in primary hyperparathyroidism. Now secondary hyperparathyroidism. Now, just a minute. Right, secondary hyperparathyroidism. Now the causes are vitamin D deficiency, which could be nutritional, or it could be fat malabsorption syndrome. And then vitamin D is not deficient, but there is defective vitamin D metabolism. And defective vitamin D metabolism in the body may occur due to anticonvulsant drug therapy, or severe liver failure, or chronic renal failure. So liver failure, renal failure, anticonvulsant therapy may lead to vitamin D defective metabolism. Defective D metabolism, right? So that would mean that calcitonin is an osteoblastic hormone, whereas PTH is an osteoclastic hormone, and deficiency of parathyroid hormone, deficiency of parathyroid hormone, a secondary hyperparathyroidism, would lead to tetanic-like features. So with this, we move on to now that when thyroidectomy is advised, the surgeon take utmost care. Sometimes it is not possible, but they take utmost care to keep the parathyroid gland intact. Otherwise, the patient has to be put on thyroxine after thyroidectomy, on thyroxine and large doses of calcium and vitamin D3. Take, and then we move on to a very important endocrine glands, because diabetes mellitus has become almost endemic in the world, especially in the Arab and Asian part of the world. Endocrine pancreas. Now there are certain dual glands. Which are the dual glands? Dual glands are those glands which have got both endocrine and exocrine activities. Which are the dual glands? One is pancreas, like its exocrine portion, which makes over 90% of the gland, secretes pancreatic juice, which through the main and accessory pancreatic duct enters into the first part of the duodenum and is responsible for absorption of fats. And then the dual glands having both exocrine and endocrine activities are the ovaries and the testes, because ovaries, they secrete an ovum, and ovaries, they secrete steroid hormones like estrogens and progesterone. And look at the testes, they secrete seminal plasma, seminal liquid, and they also secrete steroid hormone, that is androgens. So pancreas, testes, and paired testes and paired ovaries, they are the dual glands having both endocrine and exocrine functions. We are only concerned at the moment with the endocrine functions of the pancreas. Endocrine histology, endocrine cells of the pancreas, so they are located in the pancreas in the form of islands, and they were discovered by the Langerhans. So that is why they are called as islets of Langerhans of the pancreas. So this islets of the Langerhans of the pancreas has got alpha cells or A cells which secrete glucagon, beta or B cells which secrete insulin. And these beta or B cells were the first one to be discovered in the pancreas. And then is delta or D cells which secrete somatostatin. So please mind, there are two types of somatostatin, brain somatostatin and gut somatostatin. Brain somatostatin is the other name given to growth hormone inhibiting hormone secreted by hypothalamus, which inhibits secretion of growth hormone. Now, this gut somatostatin is secreted by delta or D cells of the islet of Langerhans of the pancreas, they secrete somatostatins. And somatostatin inhibits insulin and glucagon both, but especially glucagon, predominantly glucagon. And there are certain F cells as well in the pancreatic islets which secrete pancreatic polypeptides. Now look at this slide. This is the slide which is showing histological slide of the islet of Langerhans. So main portion, more 90% are the exocrine acini secreting pancreatic juice. It is 5 to 10% of the islets, and this slide shows alpha and beta cells histology. Now, how is insulin produced? Was insulin synthesized in the beta cells or B cells of the islet of Langerhans of the pancreas? So it is secreted in the form of macromolecule called as pre-proinsulin. Pre-proinsulin is a macromolecule, is a big molecule that is converted to proinsulin. Proinsulin has got 81 amino acids in its structure, 81 amino acids in its structure. And this enzymic hydrolysis occurs, and one of the chains of the insulin molecule is cut off, and it gives production of insulin. Insulin has got 51 amino acids in its side chain. So there are two chains. It is a bipeptide or a dipeptide chain, A chain and B chain, linked together by bisulfide or disulfide linkages. So insulin has got 30 amino acids in one chain and 21 amino acids in the second chain. So this A and B chain, now they are connected together by bisulfide and disulfide linkages. Whereas proinsulin has got an additional C peptide chain, which is of 30 amino acids in its structure, making it 81%. At the time of maturation, by enzymic hydrolysis, the C peptide chain is cut loose, giving rise to molecule of insulin. So there are some known diabetics in which proinsulin is formed, but proinsulin is not converted into insulin, and they give hyperglycemic features. So which are the factors? This is the list of the factors which stimulate or inhibit secretion of insulin, like glucose, mannose, arginine, leucine, amino acid, CCK, gastrin, secretin, beta ketoacidosis, acetylcholine, cyclic AMP, glucagon, beta stimulation, theophylline, and sulfonylurea. They stimulate secretion of insulin from the beta cells. Whereas somatostatin, 2-deoxyglucose, manoheptulose, alpha receptor stimulation, like our beta blockers, propranolol, or galanin, dioxide drugs, excessive use of thiazide drugs, depletion of potassium, phenytoin, alexan. Alexan is a drug which destroys beta cells of the pancreas, and it is used in the animals to induce diabetes mellitus for experimental purposes. So an insulin administration, they inhibit secretion of insulin from the beta cells of the pancreas. Look at the slide. The single most important factor is the blood glucose concentration, which determines secretion of insulin. The rest of the factors like drugs, starvation, psychic factors, hypothermia, diurnal variation, free fatty acid, serotonin, obesity, amino acids, noradrenergic stimuli, prostaglandin, calcium, potassium, and so forth, they are adjuvant factor, but single most important factor for secretion of insulin is hyperglycemia. Hyperglycemia stimulates secretion of insulin. Hypoglycemia inhibits secretion of insulin. Now, those substances which have got insulin-like activity, they are also exist in the human plasma, which are proinsulin, non-suppressible insulin-like activity. For example, non-suppressible insulin-like activity is insulin-like growth factor 1 and insulin-like factor growth 2. So they are in fact somatomedian 1 and somatomedian 2 secreted by the liver in response to growth hormone. So they are non-suppressible insulin-like activity. Now, what are the action around? I did tell you yesterday, there are 3 hormones which are very tricky as far as understanding of their mode of action is concerned. They are thyroxine, they are insulin, and they are thyroxine, insulin, and growth hormone. Why? Because some of their actions are mediated through cyclic AMP, but rest of the actions are mediated through synthesis of new proteins or synthesis of new enzymes, and by some other modes of action as well. Now, insulin, principal action of insulin. When somebody is diabetic, say for example, in your diabetic clinic, if a patient comes to you, like he is in a semi-comatose condition, and you see his blood sugar level, it is shooting up to 600 milligram per deciliter, immediately you give infusion of insulin to the patient, like insulin infusion. So what are trying to do? So as far as rapidity of action is concerned, insulin actions are divided into three: rapid actions of insulin, which may occur within seconds, or intermediate action of insulin, which may take minutes to occur, and delayed actions of insulin, which may take hours or even days to occur. So rapid actions of insulin, when insulin is given, increase transport of glucose, amino acids, and potassium into the cells, into the insulin-sensitive cells. So insulin causes increased entry of glucose into the cells. It does not only cause entry of glucose into the cells, but also it does lead to entry of amino acids and potassium into the insulin-sensitive cells. So that means when you give him insulin, large doses of insulin infusion, after half an hour or 1 hour, you estimate, you say, okay, all right, from 600, it has come to about 400 milligram per deciliter. How does it occur? Because rapid action of insulin increased transport of glucose from ECF compartment to ICF compartment, from the plasma or ECF into the cells. And then intermediate actions of insulin, which takes in minutes, which are those: stimulation of protein synthesis, inhibition of protein breakdown, activation of glycolytic enzyme, and inhibition of phosphorylase and gluconeogenic enzyme. So that means on protein metabolism or carbohydrate metabolism, actions are intermediate. So entry of glucose, amino acids, and potassium into the cell is the rapid action of insulin. Like now on protein and carbohydrate metabolism, it is an intermediate action of insulin, whereas the delayed action of insulin is lipogenic enzyme. Insulin is a lipogenic enzyme. It causes triglycerides deposits in the adipose tissue. So that is why when we put on insulin to the patient, he started increasing in weight, lipogenic activity. So rapid effect is on transport of glucose, amino acids, and potassium. Intermediate effect is concerned with protein and carbohydrate metabolism, and the delayed effect is with lipid metabolism, that is the lipogenic action of insulin. Let us talk about metabolic. It is a metabolic hormone. So let us talk about its action on carbohydrate metabolism first. Everybody knows, like even a layman on the street knows, that insulin causes hypoglycemia. And everybody on the street knows that deficiency of insulin leads to hyperglycemia. Like वो कहेगा वो जी इंसुलिन कट गई है ते blood sugar बढ़ गया है. Right? Everybody knows that, but as a science student, we ought to know how insulin causes hypoglycemia and why should deficiency of insulin lead to diabetes mellitus or hyperglycemia, right? So let us see how insulin causes hypoglycemia. Insulin increases glucose uptake by the cells, like increases glucose entry into the cells. And then insulin causes stimulation of glucokinase enzyme, which converts glucose into glucose 6-phosphate within the cells. And insulin causes increased synthesis of carrier proteins or gluts in the plasma, which carry. So the transportation of insulin from ECF to ICF is by the process of facilitated diffusion. Facilitated diffusion, it is across the electrochemical gradients, but with a higher rate. Now, insulin, now and then, the question is, do all cells in the body require insulin for glucose entry into them? Answer is no. Then the question arises, which are those cells or tissues which do not require insulin for glucose uptake, which are independent of insulin for glucose uptake? Those are the brain cells, anterior pituitary cells, hepatic cells, intestinal tubular epithelial cells, and then is the red blood cells, hepatic cells, and then lymph nodes, muscles of the iris, external genitalia, and external. So these are the exceptions. So brain cells, anterior pituitary cells, red blood cells, intestinal epithelial cells, or renal tubular epithelial cells, and then is iris of the eye, lymph nodes, and external genitalia. They do not require insulin for glucose uptake. Which are the cells which are maximally dependent upon insulin for glucose uptake? They are adipose tissue, muscle, and the heart. Adipose tissue, muscles, and heart, cardiac tissue, they are the most dependent tissue upon insulin for glucose uptake. So insulin increases glucose uptake. And secondly, on carbohydrate metabolism, insulin causes increased glucose utilization by the cells. Glucose utilization means oxidation, oxidation. So glucose is oxidized or utilized by the cells, Now that is, so glucose is utilized. And then third way by which insulin causes fall in glucose is glycogenesis. It converts glucose into glycogen, and then glycogen in turn gets deposited in the liver cells and in the muscle cells. And fourthly, glycogenolysis. It inhibits breakdown of glycogen into glucose. And finally, gluconeogenesis. It inhibits gluconeogenesis enzyme. Gluconeogenesis is production of glucose from non-carbohydrate sources, like from glycerol and from amino acids. It inhibits. And finally, is triose phosphate pathway. It stimulates triose phosphate pathway, and by which NADPH2 is formed, which is required for fat synthesis. So that would mean when insulin cause hypoglycemia by stimulation of glucose uptake by the cells, by stimulation of glucose oxidation or utilization, by stimulation of glycogenesis, by inhibition of glycogenolysis, and by stimulation of hexose monophosphate shunt or triose phosphate pathway. So this is physiology. Now, how we will convert it into pathology? Now, pathology is how does deficiency of insulin lead to hyperglycemia, lead to diabetes mellitus? That is by inhibiting glucose uptake, by inhibiting glucose utilization, by inhibiting glycogenesis, by stimulating glycogenolysis, by stimulating gluconeogenesis, and by inhibiting triose phosphate pathway. And then the effect of insulin on lipid metabolism. Look at this slide. It shows one enzyme, which is HSL, hormone sensitive lipase. Hormone sensitive lipase is a lipolytic enzyme. Lipolytic enzyme. This enzyme, when it is activated, it converts triglyceride storage pool of the adipose tissue into free fatty acids and glycerol. So insulin and adenosine inhibit hormone sensitive lipase, whereas growth hormone, thyroxine, catecholamines, especially adrenaline, glucagon, and cortisol, they stimulate HSL enzyme to cause lipolytic activity. Insulin and adenosine inhibits HSL enzyme and inhibits lipolytic activity. So there is another enzyme which is required in lipid metabolism, is called as LPL, lipoprotein lipase. It is a lipogenic hormone. It causes re-acidification of glycerol and fatty acids back to triglycerides and to their deposit in the adipose tissue. Insulin stimulates lipoprotein enzyme, and insulin inhibits HSL enzyme. So thus insulin causes lipogenesis as a delayed action, and it inhibits HSL enzyme, and it inhibits lipolytic activity. And then is its effect of insulin on protein metabolism. Now, we have seen that insulin causes increased entry of amino acids into the cells. And then these amino acids are converted into proteins, maybe muscle proteins, maybe nucleoproteins, maybe phosphoproteins, maybe bone proteins, maybe plasma proteins. So amino acids are increased entry into the cells, and then they are converted to protein. So it is a protein anabolic hormone. Sometimes the MCQs are phrased like on the effect of insulin on different tissues. For example, this is one of the MCQs. It could be converted into one of the good MCQs. There's an effect of insulin on the adipose tissue may include. These all are true, but by the jigsaw puzzle, you can restructure it into one true pattern or one best pattern. So effect of insulin on the adipose tissues are, adipose tissue is one of the most dependent tissue upon glucose entry. So it increased glucose entry. Secondly, increased fatty acid synthesis. And thirdly, increased glycerol phosphate synthesis. And then it leads to increased triglycerides deposition. It leads to activation of LPL enzyme, lipoprotein lipase enzyme. It causes inhibition of HSL enzyme, hormone sensitive lipase enzyme, and it leads to increased uptake of potassium by the adipose cells. Similarly, effect of insulin on the muscle. Muscle is again one of the most dependent tissue upon insulin for glucose uptake. There is increased glucose entry, there is increased glycogen synthetase, there is increased amino acid uptake, there is increased protein synthesis, there is decreased release of gluconeogenic amino acids, increased ketone uptakes, and increased potassium uptake. So you can reorganize this pattern to make a good MCQ of the effect of insulin on the muscle cells. Look at the liver cells, effect of insulin on the liver cells. So liver does not require insulin for glucose uptake. So that is not written here. It leads to decreased ketogenesis, increased protein synthesis, increased lipid synthesis, and there is decreased glucose due to output due to decreased gluconeogenesis and increased glycogenesis and increased glycolysis, that is utilization of glucose. And on the general cells of the body, insulin causes increased cellular growth. Right. Look at here. Sorry. We have talked about it. Now, we have talked about the basic aspects of insulin actions, basic aspects. Let us put this knowledge into practical or applied use, right? So what is diabetes mellitus? Diabetes mellitus is a metabolic syndrome characterized by relative or absolute deficiency of insulin. Relative deficiency of insulin means insulin resistance. Either it is deficiency of insulin or there is insulin resistance by the tissues. So classification of diabetes by stages. Stage 1 is pre-diabetic. Pre-diabetics are those children of diabetic parents are called as pre-diabetics. In them, fasting glucose is normal. When they take large meals, response to glucose tolerance just normal unless they become overt diabetic. Depends on genealogy, depends on their genetic mapping. Now that will remain normal. Unless they become overt diabetic, fasting glucose and response to glucose tolerance test would be normal. Then are the latent chemical diabetics. Latent chemical diabetics are those patients in which fasting glucose is normal and response to glucose tolerance test is usually normal, but they become hyperglycemic when they are exposed to stressful situation. Stressful situation. For example, they may show abnormal glucose tolerance response when some of the females, they conceive or they become pregnant. When some of the persons, they get fulminant inflammation or infections. When some of the persons, they are put on steroid or cortisone therapy, so they show hyperglycemia. When some person, when they are in rage or anger condition, they become hyperglycemic. So they are called as latent chemical diabetics. And the third stage is chemical diabetes. Like these are the chemical diabetic patients in which like sensible eating and exercise plays a miraculous role. Like in them, fasting glucose is usually normal and response to glucose tolerance test is abnormal. And because they've got delayed insulin response. Delayed, in fact, these are the patients, many of the patients of diabetic, they belong to this chemical diabetic context. Type 2 diabetes, mainly they belong to chemical diabetes category. There's delayed insulin response, right? And then fourth stage is the overt diabetic, fasting glucose is abnormal. And response to glucose tolerance test normal is as usual to that of a diabetic patient. As fasting hyperglycemia increases, the insulin response becomes inadequate. Now, diabetic ketoacidosis, now it is rarely seen because there are many drugs available, even oral hypoglycemic, though many of the patients and doctors, they use it insensibly, like they don't use it scientifically, but at least it prevents from diabetic ketoacidosis. But one diabetic ketoacidosis, so these are the features in over 300 patients of diabetic ketoacidosis. Look at the three symptoms, like that is polyuria, polydipsia, and polyphagia. What is the pathophysiology of polyuria, polydipsia, and polyphagia? Polyuria, as it is seen that uncontrolled diabetic patients increased more excretion of urine. So they have to wake up at night 2 to 3 times to void the urine. Why is polyuria due to? It is due to osmotic diuresis. Osmotic diuresis. Now, you know that glucose, sodium is the main osmotically active substance, and then is glucose and many of the colloid particles of the plasma. It is an osmotically active substance. So the physical property of osmotically active substances, they imbibe a lot of quantity of water, and when this goes to the collecting duct, that takes a lot of quantity of water with them. And this type of diuresis is independent of ADH diuresis. ADH diuresis is called as diabetes insipidus. Osmotic diuresis due to hyperglycemia is called as diabetes mellitus. So polyuria in patients of uncontrolled diabetes is due to osmotic diuresis independent of ADH. Polydipsia, increased sense of thirst, increased sense of thirst is due to volume depletion and cellular dehydration. Volume depletion, hypovolemia, and cellular dehydration. And then is polyphagia, increased sense of hunger, especially for the sweet agents. So diabetic patients, they're too crazy to eat the sweet meals. What is the reason? Please mind, we have so far studied that brain cells do not require insulin for glucose uptake, but there is a certain exception to this rule. And that exception is of the glucostat cells of the hypothalamus, or glucoreceptors. Glucoreceptors of the hypothalamus, they require insulin for glucose entry. Like these glucostat cells or glucoreceptors, though they are getting hyperglycemic blood, but there is reduced entry of glucose into the glucoreceptors due to deficiency of insulin. So these glucostat cells get a false sense of hypoglycemia. When they get false sense of hypoglycemia, they send excitatory impulses to the feeding center, which gives us desire to eat more. And they give inhibitory signals to the satiety center, and the patient gets delayed signal to stop eating, or delayed signal about the fullness of the stomach. So polyuria is due to osmotic diuresis. Polydipsia is due to volume depletion and cellular dehydration. Polyphagia is due to non-entry of glucose into the glucostat cells or glucoreceptors of hypothalamus. Right. And then there are certain hormones of the adipose tissues, which have got something to do with diabetes mellitus, especially with insulin resistance. So leptin and adiponectin, they are good adipokines because they decrease glucose resistance. Leptin and adiponectin, they decrease insulin resistance. Whereas adipokines, which are hormones of the adipose tissue, like toxic tumor necrotic factor alpha and resistin, so they are bad adipokines, they increase insulin resistance. So leptin, adiponectin, they decrease insulin resistance. TNF alpha and resistin, they increase insulin resistance. Now, this is a beautiful slide, which I love. Now, this is how is metabolism disturbed in uncontrolled diabetes mellitus. Major pathways for ketogenesis and hyperglycemia, and DKA means diabetic ketoacidosis. Or other way, how is metabolism disturbed in uncontrolled diabetes mellitus? This slide shows 3 columns. On your left side column is adipose tissue and the muscle tissue. In the middle dotted line block is the liver. And on your right hand side is the ECF or plasma or peripheral circulation. Glucose without mediation of insulin enters into the liver cells. There it is converted by glucokinase enzyme into glucose 6-phosphate. And look at the width of the arrow in the slide. Glycogenolysis, breakdown of glycogen to glucose 6-phosphate and then to glucose, is much more as compared to glycogenesis. So there is reduced glycogenesis and there is increased glycogenolysis, leading to formation of glucose. And then amino acids enter into the liver cells and they form oxaloacetates. Oxaloacetate enters into reversal of glycolytic pathway to aggravate hyperglycemia. And then fatty acids, they enter into the liver cells to form acetyl-CoA. And acetyl-CoA enters into oxaloacetate and into the reversal glycolytic pathway to aggravate hyperglycemia on one hand. On the other hand, this acetyl-CoA enters into beta oxidation pathway to form acetoacetic acid, which in turn is converted to beta hydroxybutyric acid, which in turn is converted to acetone. And these 3 are together called as ketone bodies. And then acetyl-CoA forms citrate, and citrate is converted to fatty acids. So what is the result of uncontrolled diabetes mellitus or diabetic ketoacidosis? It is characterized with much hyperglycemia, ketonemia, and ketonuria, and free fatty acidemia. Free fatty acidemia, ketonemia or ketonuria, and hyperglycemia are the main features of uncontrolled diabetes mellitus. Now, metabolic consequences of deficiency of insulin. Again, this slide shows what are the metabolic consequences, or what is the pathophysiology of deficiency of insulin, or what is the pathophysiology of uncontrolled diabetes mellitus. There is deficiency, relative or absolute, of insulin on carbohydrate metabolism. It will lead to decreased glucose uptake by the cells, leading to hyperglycemia. Hyperglycemia would lead to osmotic diuresis, which would lead to cellular dehydration and volume depletion. And this will lead to impaired renal function test. One of the classified function of the kidneys is acid-base balance. To maintain hydrogen ion concentration, kidney failure would lead to acidosis. And when there is deficiency of insulin on your left-hand side column of the slide, this will mobilize triglycerides to free fatty acid release. Free fatty acid release from the liver will enter into beta oxidation pathway in the liver to form ketogenesis. So ketogenesis superadded with acidosis will lead to ketoacidosis. So insulin deficiency, look at the right side column of the slide, that will mobilize proteins into their fractures. Amino acid release from the cells, amino acidemia would occur. this will enter into gluconeogenic pathway to aggravate hyperglycemia. On the other side, it will lead to protein catabolism, like negative nitrogen balance would result. So what is the net result of deficiency of insulin? Hyperglycemia, impaired renal function, metabolic acidosis, ketogenesis, and free fatty acidemia, and negative nitrogen balance would result. So this slide is a beautiful depiction of pathophysiology of diabetes mellitus. So then the other hormone of the pancreas, which is secreted by AR alpha cells of the pancreas, is glucagon. It is an octopeptide having 10 amino acids in a single chain. So there are various factors which may stimulate or inhibit secretion of glucagon from AR alpha cells of the islet of Langerhans of the pancreas. Those factors which stimulate are certain amino acids like alanine, like serine, glycine, cysteine, threonine. They are amino acids which may stimulate glucagon. Now, cholecystokinin, gastrin, cortisol, severe exercise, infections, other stresses, psychological stresses, beta-adrenergic stimulation, that is secretion of epinephrine or adrenaline, or theophylline and acetylcholine will stimulate secretion of glucagon. Those factors which may inhibit secretion of glucagon increase. Now, hyperglycemia inhibits glucagon, and hypoglycemia stimulates secretion of glucagon. Like, so rise of glucose in the plasma, somatostatin, secretin, free fatty acids, ketones, now administration of insulin, phenytoin sodium, and alpha adrenergic stimulation becomes norepinephrine. So norepinephrine inhibits, and epinephrine and GABA inhibits insulin secretion. Now, at one time, how is glucose homeostasis maintained? It is mainly maintained by insulin and glucagon jigsaw puzzle. If there is fallen blood sugar level, that stimulates alpha cells to secrete glucagon. Glucagon will lead to glycogenolytic activity, glycogenolysis, to release glucose into the plasma. And when they rise in plasma glucose concentration, that will stimulate beta cells. They will lead to increased entry of glucose into the cells and will lead to glucose consumption for energy. So that would mean, depending on the blood glucose concentration, in a circular fashion, hour-to-hour basis, in between the meals, just after meals, in between the two meals, just before the meals. So it will depend in a circular rhythm on the blood glucose concentration. There is increase or decrease in the rate of secretion of insulin and glucagon to maintain glucose concentration within the normal defined physiological range. Now it is said it is not insulin alone, but it is insulin and glucagon ratio, which is important to determine the pathophysiology of diabetes mellitus. This is the last slide of endocrine pancreas, and I love this slide. I love this slide. And please mind, sometimes you get confused in the conversion of the units of plasma glucose and millimole per liter or milligram per deciliter. Like the reversal factor, the conversion factor is 18. Please write it down and remember it. 18 is the conversion factor. If you want to convert milligram per deciliter into nanomole per liter, divide it by 18. If you want to convert nanomole per liter into milligram per deciliter, multiply nanomillimole per liter by 18, and you will get the figure of milligram per deciliter. Right? So let us see that this slide shows plasma glucose level at which various effects of hypoglycemia appear. Hypoglycemia is much more dangerous than hyperglycemia. Hyperglycemia may take time to develop its complications, but in hypoglycemia, if it is not attended well, it may lead to coma, even death. And then it is very important for us as doctors to know which level are lethal. Like for now, look at here. Now, if 90 milligram per deciliter is the fasting glucose level normal, then if it falls to 80, there is inhibition of insulin secretion. If plasma glucose level comes to 70 milligram per deciliter, so there is increase of glucagon, epinephrine, growth hormone secretion, but no symptoms will be seen. But if it is 55 or below, cortisol secretion is more and cognitive dysfunction appear. Now below 55, cognitive dysfunction, so that is सर चकरा रहा है, समझ नहीं आ रहा, हाथ नहीं उठाया जा रहा, खड़ा नहीं हो रहा, सर घूम गया, गिर पड़े, तो cognitive dysfunctions. मैं कहाँ हूँ, right? मुझे समझ नहीं आ रही, confusion, so cognitive dysfunctions. If blood plasma glucose level falls below 45, that it goes to 40, it leads to lethargy. Lethargy means one knows that he is going to die and he wants to stand up, but he can't move his hand or fingers. He can't move his legs. And then if it goes to 30 milligram per deciliter, it may lead to coma. And up to 20, it may lead to convulsions of the body. And below 15 or 10 or below, permanent brain damage may occur, and it may cause also death in some unattended cases. So these are the levels of hypoglycemia which must be monitored, especially in the diabetic patients. So that is why diabetic patients are always advised to keep some sweetening agents or sugar with them at the case of emergency, especially while traveling or a long journey. Right. Any question, please? Any question from parathyroid gland and endocrine pancreas? Yes, please.
Sir, lipoprotein lipase जो है under influence of insulin conversion करता है glycerol और fatty acid की.
Sure. Lipoprotein lipase is stimulated by insulin and adenosine. Insulin stimulates LPL and causes re-esterification of glycerol free fatty acids to convert them into triglycerides, which in turn gets deposited at the adipose tissue. So this is a lipogenic hormone by stimulating lipoprotein lipase.
Okay, sir. Thank you. अच्छा सर, आपने ये टेटनी का क्या बताया था? Sodium metabolism से related?
Tetany is when there is hypocalcemia. When there is hypocalcemia, right, that will lead to rapid influx of sodium from ECF to ICF. So more sodium jumping up in ICF compartment within the cell will lead to exaggerated depolarization waves, which would lead to twitching of the muscles or overdoing by the muscles, what is called as twitching or tetany-like features.
Okay, sir. Thank you.
You're welcome. Yes, please.
Sir.
Jina.
सर ये आपने हाइपोपैराथायरॉइड में बताया कि एक प्राइमरी होता है और एक सेकेंडरी हाइपोपैराथायरॉइडिज्म होता है. सर कैन वी डिफरेंशिएट क्लिनिकली बिटवीन दीस टू?
जी बिल्कुल. Why not? If there is a tumor of inflammation or tumor of the chief or principal cells of the parathyroid gland, that will be primary hyperparathyroidism. ठीक है जी. और अगर विटामिन डी हम नहीं ले रहे और लोगों में डेफिशिएंसी है और रिप्लेसमेंट विटामिन डी3 की नहीं ले रहे, तो दैट विल लीड टू सेकेंडरी हाइपरपैराथायरॉइडिज्म. और विटामिन डी इज टेकन एंड देयर इज डिफेक्टिव विटामिन डी मेटाबॉलिज्म, या कुछ एल्डरली पेशेंट्स में जबकि विटामिन डी की मेटाबॉलिज्म वैसे ही डिस्टर्ब हो जाती है, दैट मे आल्सो लीड. एंड इन सम केसेस ऑफ लिवर फेलियर, hepatic failure or renal failure or anticonvulsant therapy में भी ये secondary hyperparathyroidism हो सकती है. If the cause is within the chief cells of the parathyroid overactivity, that is primary hyperparathyroidism. If the cause is somewhere else, then the parathyroid gland, that is secondary hyperparathyroidism. Of course, the features will be much more severe in primary hyperparathyroidism as compared to secondary hyperparathyroidism.
Right, thank you sir. Sir, एक क्वेश्चन और है सर.
Sure.
सर एक चीज मुझे कभी समझ नहीं आई, काइंडली आप समझा दें कि एक डायबिटिक पेशेंट में पोलीयूरिया तो होना है, बट व्हाई इट इज सिग्निफिकेंट कि हम उसको एट नाइट जो पोलीयूरिया हो रहा है हम उसको क्यों इतना ज्यादा क्लिनिकली अप्रिशिएट करते हैं?
क्लिनिकली अप्रिशिएट ये करते हैं उसको कि दिन में बाज़ औक़ात उसे पता ही नहीं चलता, वो जाता रहता है आता रहता है, एक्टिविटी डे है और पानी पीता रहता है तो ही डज नॉट फील वर्रिड. रात को वो कहते हैं जी इस दौर में जिंदगी बशर की बीमार की रात हो गई है. When he has to wake up for 2 and 3 times at night, so he is getting other endocrinal and neurotransmitter disturbances as well. सारी रात तो उसको वो insomnia के features भी साथ शुरू हो जाएंगे and he will be more upset and will shout more कि जी रात को मुझे उठना पड़ा, मैं सारी रात सो नहीं सका. And then he has no activity otherwise. ठीक है ना जी. तो रात की जो बीमारी है वो परेशान इसलिए ज्यादा करती है, इसीलिए हम ज्यादा कहते हैं उसे. दिन को he does not have more sense. हमें भी पता नहीं चलता हम दिन में कितनी दफा यूरिनेट कर जाते हैं और कितनी दफा पानी पी जाते हैं, लेकिन हमें भी नॉर्मल फिजियोलॉजिकल बंदे को भी अगर रात को कभी 2-3 दफा उठना पड़ जाए तो सुबह देखें कि कितने अपसेटिंग होती है. दैट इज व्हाई नॉकटर्नल पॉलीयूरिया इज मोर प्रोनाउंस्ड, क्योंकि उसकी आपको इदराक बहुत ज्यादा है और उसकी तकलीफ बहुत ज्यादा है.
राइट, थैंक यू सर, थैंक यू सो मच.
सर if ब्रेन सेल जो है वो इंसुलिन की इंडिपेंडेंट ग्लूकोज अपटेक करते नहीं है ग्लूकोज अपटेक, तो पॉलीफेजिया हालांकि हाइपोथैलेमस में फीडिंग सेंटर है, वो कैसे स्टिमुलेट होगा?
नहीं, आपका क्वेश्चन क्या है? यू आर टॉकिंग ऑफ व्हाई पॉलीफेजिया occurs, ये क्या क्वेश्चन है?
Yes sir, why polyphagia occurs as the insulin is independent of glucose uptake brain cells?
जी, मैंने आपसे आज यही किया था कि ऑल द ब्रेन, एमसीक्यू भी बन सकता है कि चलो एक एमसीक्यू मैं आउट कर दूं. ऑल द ब्रेन सेल्स do not require insulin, though yeah, this is not a good MCQ, negative है. All the brain cells do not require insulin for glucose uptake except 4 और डिपाइम होंगी, 5वां होगा glucoreceptor or glucostat cell of the hypothalamus. So this is a correct answer. So that means the brain cells do not require insulin for glucose uptake, but glucoreceptors or glucostat cells of the hypothalamus, they do require insulin for glucose uptake. So insulin, glucose, though this glucoreceptor is bathed in a pool of hyperglycemia, but it is deprived of glucose because of deficiency of insulin, so it gets a false sense of hypoglycemia. When it gets a false sense of hypoglycemia, it sends stimulatory impulses to the feeding center of the hypothalamus to give signals to eat more. And then it sends inhibitory signals to the satiety center, which gives us feeling to stop eating. So यूं समझें, आपके सवाल का जवाब ये है कि brain cells do not require, but glucostat cell of the hypothalamus does require insulin for glucose uptake.
सर चैट पे एक मैसेज भेजा है, वो उसका आंसर प्लीज बता दें.
ये बताइए.
सर इंसुलिन डिपेंडेंट ग्लूकोज अपटेक अकर्स इन हाइपोथैलेमस, मायोकार्डियम या एक्सरसाइजिंग स्केलेटल मसल.
नहीं, क्वेश्चन क्या है? दोबारा से क्वेश्चन बताइए. स्टेम
चैट बॉक्स में है.
जी बताइए.
सर ग्लूकोज इंडिपेंडेंट insulin independent glucose uptake occurs in hypothalamus या exercising skeletal muscle.
Independent.
Yes sir.
Hypothalamus. I think hypothalamus, because muscle cells, adipose tissue and heart, I did tell you they're the most dependent tissue upon insulin for glucose uptake. Any other question, please? नहीं तो आगे चलें जी.
सर आपकी जो स्लाइड थी जिसमें आपने हार्मोन सेंसिटिव लाइपेज के बारे में पढ़ाया था ना, तो उसके ऊपर लिखा हुआ था कि और मतलब although not shown but ketone bodies also inhibit these hormone sensitive lipase. तो सर अगर मतलब
which slide? This slide you're talking?
या सर दिस वन.
हाँ, इसमें क्या है जी?
सर अब इसमें आप देखें ऊपर लिखा हुआ है although not shown ketone bodies में also inhibit the lipase. तो सर अगर ऐसा है तो फिर मतलब कीटो डाइट जो इतनी आजकल फेमस चल रही है उसका तो पूरा पॉइंट ही खत्म हो गया ना.
देखिए, किसी न्यूट्रिशन से पूछे, कीटो डाइट एंड कीटोन बॉडीज आर डिफरेंट. ठीक है जी. कीटोन बॉडीज आर एसिटोएसिटिक एसिड, बीटा हाइड्रोक्सीब्यूटारिक एसिड एंड एसीटोन. ठीक है जी. वो जो कमर्शियली कहते हैं ये कीटोन बॉडीज जो है यहाँ पर, ये डाइट के सिलसिले में नहीं लिखा हुआ. ये कीटोन बॉडीज आर एसिटोएसिटिक एसिड, बीटा हाइड्रोक्सीब्यूटारिक एसिड एंड एसीटोन. उनके बारे में कीटोन डाइट नहीं है ये. बट लुक एट द न्यूट्रिशन. जी जी. आपको इस सवाल का जवाब जो कीटोन डाइट है वो बुक में तलाश करने की बजाय इंटरनेट पे चले जाएं, विच आर द कीटोन बॉडीज. ठीक है जी. नॉट कीटोन बॉडीज, व्हाट इज द कीटो डाइट. बट कीटोन बॉडीज आर poisonous. They are acetoacetic acid, beta hydroxybutyric acid, and acetone. जी.
So I guess resting skeletal muscles and exercising skeletal muscles both require insulin for glucose uptake.
जी 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 जी, दोनों में है. फिजियोलॉजिकली भी है, but requirement will be much more in the exercising muscle as compared to the normal muscles.
Yes. Okay, sir. Thank you.
चले जी, इंशाल्लाह नेक्स्ट पे.
Yes, sir.
Thank you. Good, you're too attentive. Footnote भी साथ पढ़ रहे हैं. I'm so glad. God bless you all. Right. Adrenal gland. As we all know, adrenal gland, its old name was suprarenal gland because of its anatomical location. चूंकि kidneys के ऊपर है, so that is why it was called as suprarenal gland. But now it is called as adrenal gland. It has got two portions. The inner one is adrenal medulla. The outer one is called as adrenal cortex. So this is the adrenal gland. So this is the outer portion and the inner portion. Now we are आज के दिन में we will discuss adrenal medulla because adrenal cortex is a huge gland that we will discuss next time, and then we will switch on to GIT physiology. Now let us talk about adrenal medulla. Like adrenal medulla is peculiar endocrine gland because it secretes hormones which are called as catecholamines. Why they are called as catecholamines? Because they contain catechol ring and amine group or NH2 group as a side chain. Catechol ring or amine group as a side chain are called as catecholamines. Look at the catechol ring. That is the catechol ring, and look at the side, NHH likha hua hai. So this is NH2. So they have got catechol ring and amine group, NH2 group as a side chain, which are epinephrine or adrenaline or norepinephrine or noradrenaline. And they are derived from a common amino acid precursor called as tyrosine. Look at this slide. Now find out on your left side lower column of the slide of the adrenal medulla. Adrenal medulla is autonomically innervated by preganglionic sympathetic nerve fiber. Like autonomically, it is innervated by preganglionic sympathetic nerve fiber. But there is no postganglionic nerve fiber. The postganglionic message is taken by secretion of the hormone called as epinephrine through the general circulation to the effector organ. So that is why adrenal gland embryologically takes its origin from the neural portion, autonomically is innervated by preganglionic sympathetic nerve fiber, and was considered as a modified sympathetic ganglion. in old days. It was considered as a modified sympathetic ganglion, which has been modified to secrete hormone called as adrenaline. That is why this is called as a neuroendocrine organ. So then is how hormones, catecholamines, are synthesized. So the cells of the adrenal medulla, they are called as pheochromocytes. That is why the tumor of the pheochromocytes is called as pheochromocytoma, or they are called as chromophene cells. Why they are called so? Because they have got affinity with chromic acid stain, chrome stain. Like, so the precursor is tyrosine. The other name of tyrosine is MOPA, monohydroxyphenylalanine, MOPA. So MOPA, monohydroxy, is converted to dihydroxy. The biochemical process, of course, is hydroxylation. So tyrosine or MOPA is hydroxylated to dopa dihydroxyphenylalanine. So this dopa is decarboxylated, that is, carboxyl group is removed and is converted to an inhibitory neurotransmitter called as dopamine. Like, so the transport of dopamine into the vesicles occurs where decarboxylation occurs further, and dopamine is converted to another neurotransmitter called as norepinephrine. So this norepinephrine is formed mainly in the post-ganglionic sympathetic nerve fibers. Norepinephrine is mainly formed in the post-ganglionic sympathetic nerve fibers and partially in the adrenal medulla. But in the adrenal medulla cells, that is in the pheochromocytes, this step goes one step further, that is norepinephrine is acted by an methyltransferase enzyme by the process of methylation and is converted to epinephrine. So please mind, when in the stem of MCQ is on norepinephrine, your neuron should switch on to functions of the postganglionic sympathetic nerve fiber. When the stem is on epinephrine, your neurons should switch on to the functions of adrenal medulla. Norepinephrine is the main neurotransmitter secreted at the nerve endings of the postganglionic sympathetic nerve fiber. Adrenaline is the main hormone secreted by the adrenal medulla. Like, now look at here. Now these two hormones, they are all the hormones of the body, so is the catecholamines. They are inactivated in the liver. They can be inactivated in the kidney and other tissues as well, but mainly in the liver. And they are excreted in the kidney, that is through the urine. But they could also be excreted in other excreta like fecal material, sweat, saliva, menstrual flow, like tears, like as well, but mainly from the urine. In which metabolite form they are excreted in the urine? Like, they are excreted in the urine in the form of metanephrine, normetanephrine, and VMA. VMA is vanillyl mandelic acid. Which are the enzymes which activate them? There are two enzymes, MAO, monoamino oxidase, and COMT, that is catechol O-methyl transferase. So why I'm saying it? Like, because it is very difficult to estimate basal levels of adrenaline from the plasma, even with the discovery of monoclonal antibodies. Because adrenaline comes in a very small amount. Within fraction of a second, it triggers the action and it fades away. It is inactivated. Like तीली लगा के चली जाती है. Like, so that is why now how well you know the endocrinal status of the adrenal medulla. So then the doctor advises the pathology, chemical pathology laboratory, give him a large receptacle covered antiseptic, like to collect 24 hours collection of urine. And then the next morning, they estimate metanephrine, normetanephrine, and VMA, especially VMA, vanillyl mandelic acid, and 24 hours excretion of the urine, and they compare it with the normal value of VMA excretion in normal amount in 24 hours of urine. That gives us a clue to know about the endocrinal status of the adrenal medulla. So if you suspect somebody to be a case of pheochromocytoma, like advised chemical pathology department to estimate VMA in his 24 hours collection of urine, right? To know the endocrinal status of adenomedulla. How do catecholamines affect the target tissue? What is the mode of action is not well known, right? It is not well known and it is very complicated. Only the metabolic actions of adrenaline, they are mediated through cyclic AMP system. Apart from few metabolic actions, rest of the actions, the mechanism is not known, but probably that is due to adrenergic receptor concept. When we were making slides for adrenergic receptors, I thought it appropriate to make slides for autonomic receptors to give you an overview, right? So autonomic receptors are cholinergic or adrenergic. Cholinergic receptors are muscarinic or nicotinic type of receptors. Adrenergic receptors could be alpha receptors or could be beta adrenergic receptors. Alpha receptors are subdivided into alpha 1 and alpha 2, and beta type of receptors are subdivided into beta 1 and beta 2 type of adrenergic receptors. So that is structure-function relationship. In fact, anatomy and physiology is the knowledge of structure-function relationship. Like, so what is the location of the cholinergic nicotinic type of receptors? So please mind, nicotinic word starts with N, and nervous or neural word also starts with N. So whenever there is in the stem or in the item, when there is a word nicotine and in the options, it is neural tissue, so nicotinic receptors are present on the neural tissue. For example, in the neuromuscular junction of the skeletal muscles, in the parasympathetic and sympathetic postganglionic neurons, like it is in fact preganglionic neurons. I apologize for the error in the slide. Parasympathetic and sympathetic preganglionic neurons and cholinergic synapses of the central nervous system. So nicotinic type of cholinergic receptors are located on the neural tissues, where muscarinic type of cholinergic receptors, they are located on the visceral effector tissues, for example, pacemaker of the heart, SA node, GIT, smooth muscle of the GIT, arterioles of the genitalia, iris of the eye, salivary glands, sweat glands, lung airways or bronchioles, and smooth muscle of the urinary bladder. And look at the location of the adrenergic receptors. Alpha 1 type of adrenergic receptors are located on arterioles of most of the organs, on the sweat glands, on the salivary glands, on iris of the eye, on the uterus, on the fat cells. Whereas alpha 2 type of adrenergic receptors, they are located on adrenergic axon terminals, on the blood platelets, on intestine, on the brain cells, on the uterus. So uterus is supplied with both alpha 1 as well as alpha 2 type of adrenergic receptors. Now, beta 1 type of adrenergic receptors, they are located in the heart. Where? In the pacemaker of the heart and in the muscle of the heart, myocardium, SA node and myocardium. Whereas beta 2 type of adrenergic receptors, they are located on arterioles of the heart, on the skin, arterioles of the skin, arterioles of the lungs, arterioles of the skeletal muscles. So that is why when we run around, like when we do exercise, are we in an emergency state of fight, flight, and fright? So arterioles of the heart, of the skin, of the lungs, and skeletal muscles, they open up to give the blood supply to them because they have to work more in fight, flight, and fright situations. And on the lung airways, right, and on the intestine, look at the intestine. Intestine have got alpha 2 as well as beta 2 type of adrenergic receptor. And then on the fat cells have got alpha 1 as well as beta 2 type of adrenergic receptors. So this was the anatomical location. So let us see their operation and function. What would happen when they get stimulated? Like when alpha type of adrenergic receptors are stimulated, they lead to vasoconstriction of all the blood vessels. They lead to iris dilatation. They lead to smooth muscle relaxation of the intestine, intestinal sphincter constriction, like internal sphincter intestinal sphincter constriction, pilomotor contraction, sphincter, urinary bladder, internal vesical sphincter constriction. So alpha receptors are mainly stimulated by norepinephrine, and beta receptors are mainly stimulated by epinephrine. So when beta receptors are stimulated, they will lead to vasodilation, especially beta 2. Vasodilation of which blood vessels? Of the arterioles of the heart, arteriole of the skin, arterioles of the lungs, arterioles of the skeletal muscles, with restoration of the brain blood flow, and cardio acceleration by its action on the pacemaker of the heart. And then is increased myocardial contractility, and then is smooth muscle intestinal relaxation, uterine smooth muscle relaxation, bronchodilation, and then is calorigenesis. I did tell you there are 3 hormones. The main important is thyroxine, to some extent is adrenaline, and to a very small extent is progesterone during the early post-ovulatory phase, responsible for thermoregulation or calorigenesis. And then it leads to metabolic actions, glycogenolysis, lipolytic activity, and smooth muscle of the urinary bladder relaxation, And then look at the innervation. So that is on your left-hand side is a preganglionic neuron, preganglionic sympathetic nerve fiber, and then there is a ganglion, and then there is a postganglionic sympathetic nerve fiber. Now that is secreting norepinephrine. On your left-hand side is alpha receptors, in the middle is beta 1, and your right-hand side is beta 2 type of receptors. So these postganglionic sympathetic nerve ending secretes norepinephrine. Norepinephrine affects alpha receptors and beta 1 type of receptors and has no effect on beta 2 type of adrenergic receptor. So there is innervation of the adrenal medulla. On your right-hand side is preganglionic sympathetic nerve fiber. Now from here, the postganglionic message is taken by secretion of hormone epinephrine. So epinephrine through the blood circulation affects alpha, beta 1, and beta 2 type of receptors, but predominantly beta 2 type of adrenergic receptor. So that means norepinephrine mainly stimulates alpha receptors, and epinephrine mainly stimulates beta type of adrenergic receptors. It is wrong to conceive that alpha receptors are excitatory and beta receptors are inhibitory. Both of them could have inhibitory or excitatory action. Let us concentrate only the column, the lower column of the slide on the 4 blocks. On your left-hand side, the lower column 2 blocks are for the alpha receptors. And look at the extreme left lower block, that is the excitatory action when alpha type of adrenergic receptors get stimulated, which may include blood vessel constrictions, all the blood vessels under influence of norepinephrine, and smooth muscle, sphincters of the intestine and sphincter of the urinary bladder constriction of the internal vesical sphincter and internal intestinal sphincter. And when alpha receptors are stimulated, they inhibit their actions on the pancreas, inhibition of secretion of pancreatic juice, and inhibition of insulin secretion. So please mind, alpha receptors inhibit insulin secretion, and beta receptors, they stimulate insulin secretion. On your right-hand side column, look at beta 1 type of receptors. Beta 1 type of receptors, when they're stimulated, so they are located only in the heart. Where in the heart? On the myocardium and in the pacemaker of the heart. Positive inotropic effect, that is increase in force of contraction of the heart. Dromotropic effect, increase in excitability of the excitable tissue of the heart. And then is positive chronotropic effect, increase in rate of the heart. So these effects are mediated through alpha receptor stimulatory action. And beta 2 type of receptor stimulatory action is glycogenolysis. And its inhibitory action is blood vessels. Which blood vessels? When beta receptors are stimulated, blood vessels to the heart, to the skin, to the lungs, to the skeletal muscles, they are inhibited and they get dilated. And smooth intestinal muscles or gastric motility, intestinal motility is inhibited. Now this story of this is the slide. I love this slide. If you could understand this slide, you will never forget structure-function relationship and physiopharmacology of the catecholamines, right? For example, look at the upper column. In the middle, it is written epinephrine. On your right-hand side, it's written isoproterenol. On the left side, it is written norepinephrine. And the slightly lower is written alpha receptors, beta-1 receptors, and beta-2 type of adrenergic receptors. Look at the slide carefully. Norepinephrine affects alpha receptors and beta-1 type of adrenergic receptors, but it has no effect on beta-2 type of adrenergic receptors. Like, look at epinephrine block. Like, epinephrine affects alpha receptors, beta-1 and beta-2 type of adrenergic receptors, but predominantly beta type of adrenergic receptors. Look at isoproterenol. Isoproterenol affects beta-1 and beta-2 type of adrenergic receptors and has no effect on alpha type of receptors. When we intend to block effects mainly brought about by norepinephrine, we use alpha blockers. I repeat. When the physician or a cardiologist intend to block the effects mainly induced by norepinephrine, he or she uses alpha blocker, for example, phentolamine. When the physician or cardiologist intends to block mainly the effects induced by epinephrine, he uses beta blocker like propranolol or oxpranolol. So beta blockers mainly block the effect of epinephrine. Alpha blockers mainly block the effect brought about by norepinephrine. Now we come to the columns of the slide. Look at, on your left-hand side, heart. Now heart has got beta-1 type of adrenergic receptors, anatomy. Now physiology. What does it do when beta type of adrenergic receptors on the pacemaker and on the myocardium are stimulated? They lead to positive chronotropic, positive bromotropic, positive inotropic effect. Look at the blood vessels. Blood vessels, all the blood vessels, arterioles, they have got alpha type of receptors, alpha 1. When it is stimulated, it will lead to constriction, leading to rise of total peripheral resistance, leading to rise of diastolic blood pressure. But when beta-2 receptors are stimulated, what will it do? It will lead to dilation of the blood vessels, to the heart, to the skin, to the lungs, to the skeletal muscles, to do dilation of the blood vessels or the skeletal muscles. So it will lead to fall in total peripheral resistance and fall in diastolic blood pressure. Look at the bronchi. Bronchi have got only beta-2 type of adrenergic receptors. And beta-2 type of adrenergic receptors are not influenced by norepinephrine. So it is only adrenaline which will cause dilation of the bronchioles in the condition of bronchospasm. And this adrenaline in old days was used as one of the drugs in bronchial asthma to relieve the bronchospasm. But then it got obsolete because of its toxic effects on the heart. Look at the fat cells has got beta-2 receptors, lipolytic activity. Insulin secretion, I did tell you. Now insulin beta cells have got alpha receptors, which stimulated when they lead to inhibition of insulin secretion. And when insulin beta cells have got beta-2 adrenergic receptors as well, when they get stimulated, insulin secretion is much more. And liver has got, there is an error in the slide, liver has got beta-2 type of adrenergic receptors, which when stimulated leads to glycogenolysis, breaks down of glycogen into glucose, causing hyperglycemia. Renin has got beta-2 type of adrenergic receptors. When it's stimulated, it will lead to renism, rise of blood pressure. GIT, smooth muscle motility. Relaxation in both the cases by alpha receptors and beta-2 adrenergic receptors. Now, this is probably the last slide of adrenal medulla, that is comparison of adrenal. Sometimes there is a direct MCQ. Now, before going to this slide, let us see effect of the two catecholamines on cardiovascular system. Like, look at the upper column of the slide. Epi means epinephrine, and nor means norepinephrine. Now, when epinephrine is given adrenaline, it increases heart rate. Like, and then in case of norepinephrine, that decreases heart rate. Look at the arterial pressure. The upper column is of systolic blood pressure, and the lower column, shown with the red color, is of the diastolic blood pressure. With adrenaline, systolic blood pressure rises and diastolic blood pressure falls. Why diastolic blood pressure falls? Because of the dilation of the blood vessels of the skeletal muscles. So widening the pulse pressure. With adrenaline, systolic blood pressure rises. With fall in diastolic blood pressure, widening the pulse pressure. Whereas in case of norepinephrine, there is variable effect on systolic blood pressure, but diastolic blood pressure tremendously increases due to increased total peripheral resistance brought about by vasoconstriction of all the arterioles of the blood vessels. Like, and then look at total peripheral cardiac output. With the case of epinephrine, cardiac output is increased. In case of norepinephrine, cardiac output is decreased. And look at total peripheral resistance. Total peripheral resistance falls in case of epinephrine. Total peripheral resistance by the constriction of the arteriole of the skeletal muscles increases tremendously because of norepinephrine, right? And then look at this slide. Sometimes the MCQ is a very direct MCQ. Effect of adrenaline differ from noradrenaline in that. Or effect of noradrenaline resembles with adrenaline in that. Like, if we don't take into an account of adrenergic receptor concept, like direct comparison of effect of adrenaline and noradrenaline. Look at heart rate, it is increased with adrenaline and decreased with noradrenaline. Look at cardiac output, increased with adrenaline, variable effects in case of norepinephrine. Look at total peripheral resistance, decrease, fall in adrenaline, and tremendous rise in case of norepinephrine. So systolic blood pressure will rise, diastolic blood pressure will fall, widening the pulse pressure in case of adrenaline, right? Now, so variable effect on systolic blood pressure, but tremendously increase diastolic blood pressure in case of norepinephrine. Cutaneous blood vessels constrict with both adrenaline and noradrenaline. Skeletal blood vessels, they dilate with adrenaline, but they constrict with adrenaline, constrict with noradrenaline. Bronchi, dilation with adrenaline, but no dilation or less dilation with noradrenaline. Metabolism is increased much more. This is only effect on the metabolism, which is mediated through cyclic AMP system. Rest of the actions are mediated through by alpha or beta or both type of adrenergic receptors. Oxygen consumption of the tissues per unit time is increased with adrenaline, but no such effect in case of norepinephrine. Oxygen consumption, blood glucose level is increased by adrenaline, no such increase in norepinephrine. So norepinephrine is not a metabolic hormone, but adrenaline is a metabolic hormone. Look at the effect on central nervous system, CNS. Now, adrenaline, norepinephrine causes four A's. That is an awareness, that is activity, that is awakefulness, and alertness. So norepinephrine causes alertfulness, awakefulness, and activity, whereas norepinephrine causes anxiety. In normal life, हम भी तो कहते हैं, ओ यार बड़ी टेंशन है, यार एड्रेनलिन बड़ी सीक्रेट हो रही है. We never said कि यार noradrenaline बड़ी सीक्रेट हो रही है. So this anxiety is the function of adrenaline, and wakefulness and activity and alertness is the action of norepinephrine. So uterus in the late pregnancy inhibits movements with adrenaline and stimulatory movements with norepinephrine. Now the renal blood flow in both the cases with adrenaline and noradrenaline, both of them, they get vasoconstricted. So by this mechanism, so adrenaline is supposed to be a hormone which makes us able to face the situation of fight, flight, and fright in case of emergency by opening the blood vessels to the skin, to the lungs, to the heart, and to the skeletal muscles, and then relieving the bronchospasm of the bronchiole because they have to work more in case of emergency. Now, tumor of the pheochromocytes or chromophene cells is called as pheochromocytoma. And in pheochromocytoma, there is labile hypertension, there is labile hyperglycemia, and then there is anxiety and tension all the time. There is sweating, there is insomnia, and there is rise of blood pressure. So person is very much miserable. So in that case, what could be the diagnosis? We don't have immunoassay established for adrenaline in the country, and even in the West country, it is not available in most of the places because it is difficult to pick up the measurable quantity of adrenaline from the plasma. So the best thing is what to do, estimation of VMA from the excretion of 24 hours collection of urine. Time permits us, we go with adrenal cortex and we leave it at one space in order to save time. Let us move on to the other part of the adrenal gland called as adrenal cortex. Look at this. This is adrenal cortex. 80 to 90% of the adrenal gland is made up of by the adrenal cortex, and 10 to 20% of the adrenal gland is made up of the adrenal medulla. Adrenal cortex has 3 layers or 3 zones, are named after the GFR. From outside within, the outermost layer is the zona glomerulosa. Now this nomenclature has been made according to the arrangement of the cells in those zones. So if they look like glomerulus-like, so the glomerulus-like. So if they look like bundle-like, their zona fasciculata is the middle layer. If they look like network-like, reticularis, zona reticularis. So outer layer is zona glomerulosa, middle layer is zona fasciculata, and inner layer is zona reticularis. So the adrenal medullary cells, adrenocortical cells, they secrete hormones called as steroid hormones. So steroid hormones have got common structural nucleus or configuration in their structure called as cyclopentano, parhydrophenanthrin ring in their structure. You can see this ring. This is CPPP ring in the structure of all the steroid hormones. And then they are derived from a common precursor, which is a common precursor called as cholesterol. Like adrenocortical cells, now testicular cells, ovarian cells, they are steroid in nature. And these steroid hormones, they act through cytoplasmic receptors and by enhancing synthesis of new proteins and new enzymes. Now, they secrete a variety of hormones which are grouped into 3. Glucocorticoid hormones, mineralocorticoid hormones, and adrenal androgens. Glucocorticoid hormones include cortisol, which is also called as hydrocortisone. Cortisol or hydrocortisone is the main glucocorticoid, main potent glucocorticoid, head of the family of glucocorticoids. So cortisol or hydrocortisone, corticosterone, 11-deoxycortisol, and cortisol. I repeat, cortisol or hydrocortisone, corticosterone, 11-deoxycortisol, and cortisone are the glucocorticoids, the most potent being cortisol or hydrocortisone. Whereas mineralogenic hormones of the adrenal cortex are 2. The potent mineralocorticoid is aldosterone, and the weak mineralocorticoid is deoxycorticosterone. and then adrenal gland of the both genders, male and female, that secretes weak androgens, that is dehydroepiandrosterone, DHEA, dehydroepiandrosterone, and androstenedione, ASD, androstenedione. Then this androstenedione in turn is converted into testosterone. So let us see how the hormones of the adrenal cortex are synthesized from each of the layer of the adrenal cortex. Look at the biosynthetic pathway occurring in the zona glomerulosa layer of the adrenal cortex. Please mind, zona glomerulosa layer of the adrenal cortex is devoid of ACTH receptors. Like it does not have abundance of ACTH receptors. So this is independent of ACTH. Now it can synthesize its own cholesterol, but cholesterol is also taken from the plasma. By enzyme-dependent biosynthetic pathway, this cholesterol is changed into pregnenolone, which in turn is changed into progesterone, which in turn is changed into deoxycorticosterone, which in turn is changed into a weak glucocorticoid, corticosterone, which in turn is converted to 18-hydroxycorticosterone, which in turn is converted to a potent mineralocorticoid, aldosterone. So that would mean that zona glomerulosa, the outermost layer of the adrenal cortex, from the precursor cholesterol mainly forms aldosterone independent of secretion of ACTH. Like independent of ACTH. It does not require ACTH. It is independent because the zona glomerulosa cells, they don't have ACTH receptors. So biosynthetic pathway in the middle layer of the adrenal cortex called as zona fasciculata. Now, it can synthesize its own cholesterol, but cholesterol is also taken from the plasma. So cholesterol is converted to pregnenolone, to 17-alpha hydroxypregnenolone, to 17-alpha hydroxyprogesterone, to 11-deoxycortisol, a weak glucocorticoid, which is converted into a potent glucocorticoid, cortisol or hydrocortisone. And these cells of the zona fasciculata, they are rich in ACTH receptors. And ACTH stimulates the enzyme synthesis and activity of the enzymes required in the biosynthetic pathway of cortisol. So that means the middle layer, zona fasciculata layer, forms cholesterol like under influence of ACTH. Whereas the inner layer, zona reticularis, can synthesize its cholesterol. It can also take it from the plasma, which is converted to pregnenolone, to 17-alpha hydroxypregnenolone, which is converted to weak androgen, dehydroepiandrosterone, which in turn is converted to androstenedione, another weak androgen. So that means that zona glomerulosa layer makes mineralocorticoid, aldosterone, independent of ACTH receptors. Zona fasciculata, middle layer, forms glucocorticoid, cortisol under influence of ACTH. Zona reticularis forms adrenal androgens. Right? Now, sum total or summary of the biosynthetic pathway. What we have talked about, cholesterol is the common precursor, which will make pregnenolone, which forms either progesterone or 17-hydroxypregnenolone. Now, progesterone is acted and forms corticosterone, which in turn is converted to aldosterone in the zona glomerulosa layer of the adrenal cortex. Whereas the 17-hydroxypregnenolone and progesterone by enzyme actions is converted to 17-hydroxyprogesterone, which in turn is converted to cortisol in the middle layer in the zona fasciculata layer of the adrenal cortex, like under influence of ACTH. Whereas 17-hydroxypregnenolone, like in the zona reticularis layer, will form dehydroepiandrosterone, which in turn will be converted to testosterone, which in turn will be converted to estrogen. So please mind that the precursor, immediate precursor for testosterone is the androgen androstenedione. An immediate precursor of estrogen is testosterone. First, androgens will be formed, then it will be converted to estrogens. Then it will be converted to estrogens. So then is the actions, so then is actions of cortisol and actions of aldosterone and their functioning test of adrenal cortex, and then is their abnormalities of the adrenal cortex. So that we will cover in the next session, because that is a long topic. If we start now, it will break down at certain point, so it will be difficult to grasp in the next. So next time, what we are going to do, initial half an hour or so, we will talk about the actions of glucocorticoid hormones, especially cortisol and aldosterone. And then we will switch on to their applied and clinical aspects, that is adrenocortical function tests and abnormalities of the adrenal cortex. And then we will switch on to physiology, introduction to the physiology of the gastrointestinal tract or the digestive system or the gut physiology, right? With this, if there's any question, right, from the sections covered today, what we have done today, we started with parathyroid gland, and then we switched on to endocrine pancreas, and then we talked about, discussed about adrenal medulla with a special focus on the adrenergic receptor concept, and then we had introductory session on the adrenal cortex. So from these sections which have been covered today, if there is any question, please ask, I will try to answer. I can't guarantee, but I will try to answer. Please, any question?
Excuse me, sir. There is a question.
जी.
सर आपने नॉरएपिनेफ्रिन में बताया था कि टोटल पेरिफेरल रेजिस्टेंस जो है वो उसमें डिक्रीज हो जाती है. सर, व्हाट इज द रीजन बिहाइंड इट?
यस, देखिए, रीजन बिहाइंड दिस, ये देखिए, राइट, आ जाए. आप देखिए, क्वेश्चन क्या था आपका?
कि सर नॉरएपिनेफ्रिन टोटल पेरिफेरल रेजिस्टेंस को कम क्यों करेगी?
आप गलत कह रही हैं ना,
ओ
उल्टा कह
सॉरी
रही हैं.
सर, क्यों करेगी? इंक्रीज क्यों करेगी?
That is why I was confused. Like, look at the muscle cells. Muscle means skeletal muscles. आ गई हैं आप muscles, vessels जहाँ लिखे हैं, ठीक है? आ गई है स्लाइड पे जो जहाँ muscles, vessels लिखे हैं, muscle vessel. That means vessels of the skeletal muscles. If we look at the human body, the bulk of the body is made up by the skeletal muscles. And the more blood flow is to the skeletal muscles because they make the major bulk of the body. Look at adrenaline. When adrenaline is given, that dilates the blood vessels to the skeletal muscles. Dilation means falling of total peripheral resistance. Falling of total peripheral resistance would mean fall in diastolic blood pressure. Look at the effect of norepinephrine. Vessels of the skeletal muscles, that leads to constriction of all the blood vessels because they are supplied with alpha-1 type of receptors. ठीक है जी? So blood vessels जो हैं, वो alpha-1 and beta-2. So when alpha-1 receptors are stimulated under influence of adrenaline, that will lead to constriction of the blood vessels to the skeletal muscles, which make bulk of the body, increasing total peripheral resistance and leading to rise of diastolic blood pressure. ठीक है?
Okay, sir. Thank you.
और this is also, अगर आप देखें, this is also shown in this slide as well. आप आ जाएं सबसे नीचे total peripheral resistance और देखें epinephrine को. Epinephrine is reducing total peripheral resistance due to dilation of the blood vessels to the skeletal muscles. और norepinephrine के कॉलम में देखें, it is increasing total peripheral resistance due to alpha-1 type of adrenergic receptors by causing constriction of even the skeletal blood vessels. ठीक है? और इसी के ऊपर अगर चले जाएं रेड कॉलम ऑफ द स्लाइड, तो diastolic blood pressure देखें, it has arisen in case of norepinephrine and diastolic blood pressure has decreased in case of epinephrine. ठीक है? Right. Any other question, please?
सर एक विसिक्यूज आया था पिछले पेपर में, तो उसमें थिक स्लाइवा का बताया था कि थिक स्लाइवा इज प्रोड्यूस्ड बाय, उसमें नॉर्मल स्लाइवा का तो पता है कि अल्फा 1 रिसेप्टर है, लेकिन
क्या
थिक
चीज?
स्लाइवा के बारे में, थिक स्लाइवा
किसके
के बारे में जरा बताइए।
किसके बारे में जी?
सर थिक स्लाइवा इज प्रोड्यूस्ड बाय अल्फा 1 रिसेप्टर, अल्फा 1 बीटा 1, ऐसा कोई वो आया हुआ था।
Thick saliva?
यस सर।
Thick what?
Sir, thick saliva.
है जी?
Thick salivary secretion.
Sir, thick saliva, thick saliva.
Thick saliva is secreted by?
आप चैट बॉक्स में लिख
Options
लेना
क्या
बेटा, राइट डाउन इन
Options
द
क्या?
म्यूट प्लीज, म्यूट, बच्चे की आवाज आ रही है, वी आर गेटिंग
अच्छा,
डिस्टर्ब।
मुझे बताइए उसके ऑप्शंस क्या है, आइटम्स क्या है उसके नीचे? Thick saliva is produced by A, B, C, D, E. वो क्या है?
Sir, सारे receptors
अल-
like alpha 1, alpha 2, beta 1, beta 2.
Alpha 1, alpha 2, beta 1, beta 2. Thick is beta 2 type of receptors. Beta 2.
थैंक यू सर।
Welcome. Yes, please. Any other question, please? But देखिए जी, questions are always wise, the answer are usually unwise. तो पूछिए, this is a training phase, not an examination phase. So questions are always wise. तो पूछिए जो भी है, whatever.
सर आपने बताया था कि सारे फंक्शंस जो है नॉर एपिनेफ्रिन के वो मतलब सिर्फ एक आपने कहा था कि साइक्लिक एएमपी के थ्रू होता है, वो कौन से रिपीट कर देंगे, वो मिस हो गया।
देखिए मैं बताऊं आपको, एड्रेनलिन के इफेक्ट जो है मेटाबॉलिक एक्शंस, एड्रेनलिन कॉजेस हाइपरग्लाइसीमिया, एड्रेनलिन कॉजेस लाइपोलिटिक एक्टिविटी, ठीक है जी। ये जो इफेक्ट है, एड्रेनलिन इंक्रीजेस ऑक्सीजन कंजम्पशन ऑफ द टिश्यूज, ये तीन फंक्शंस इज मेटाबॉलिक एक्शंस ऑफ एड्रेनलिन mainly. So they are mediated through cyclic AMP. Rest of them, they are not mediated through cyclic AMP. They are probably mediated through adrenergic receptor concept. But that is still a concept. We don't know yet exactly which mode of action fits in well for actions of catecholamines. ठीक है जी?
Thank you, sir.
Oh, you're welcome. Yes, please. Any other question, please?
Excuse me, sir. ये जो आप वर्ड्स का मतलब बता रहे थे, ग्लोमेरुलोसा, fasciculata, reticularis, ये प्लीज दोबारा बता दें।
जी, there are three layers of the adrenal cortex from outside within, named after the type of arrangement of the cells within each layer. Outer layer is zona glomerulosa, which is devoid of, which does not have ACTH receptors, and this is the site for biosynthesis of mineralocorticoid, mainly aldosterone, independent of ACTH. Middle layer, zona fasciculata, that is rich in ACTH receptors. Under influence of ACTH, it forms glucocorticoids mainly, that is cortisol. And the inner layer, zona reticularis, from cholesterol, that forms adrenal androgens, that is dehydroepiandrosterone and androstenedione, which in turn may or may not be converted to testosterone and thence to estradiol or estrogens. Right. Any other question, please? Have the best utility of time. Ask question, please. Yes, please.
Thank you, sir. I don't think so. There are questions. Thank
Okay,
you.
thank you. अच्छा, मुझे ये बता दीजिएगा मेरी नेक्स्ट क्लास अब कब है ताकि मैं नोट कर लूं।
So 30th November.
Pardon?
30th November.
30th November or October?
Sir, October.
October.
अच्छा 30th October, and that is on Saturday, isn't it?
30th अक्टूबर तो है भी नहीं बेटा,
30th October तो है ही नहीं जी।
अब आपके 6th वीक में है।
अच्छा 6th वीक में कब है जी? क्योंकि मेरे 4 सेशंस थे, 2 सेशंस हो गए हैं और जो 4th लास्ट इज ऑन 5th of November, दैट इज नोटेड विद मी। ठीक है जी, उससे पहले मुझे एक सेशन चाहिए होगा एक, क्योंकि 4 सेशन थे ना।
एक्सक्यूज मी डॉक्टर साहब, आपकी
जी जी फरमाइए।
4 नवंबर को है?
अच्छा
नहीं 4 नवंबर को नहीं, आई एम सॉरी।
जी जी
आपके 5 नवंबर को है GIT,
जी जी।
और आपकी बस यही है। और आपने उनके साथ चेंज किया था ना आपका?
नहीं चेंज किया था। देखें टोटल में जैसे 4 सेशंस, 2 सेशंस तो आज हो गए, और 5th नवंबर को विल बी 3rd सेशन, तो GIT खत्म नहीं हो पाएगा उसमें 2 घंटे में।
आपको GIT के 2 ही दिए हैं 5th
अच्छा,
नवंबर।
पहले तो 8 आवर्स थे ना टोटल, 4 सेशंस 2 आवर्स। चले आप चेक कर लीजिएगा, मुझे जरा सिर्फ मुझे बता दीजिएगा फिर। 5th नवंबर को इट इज नोटेड विद बी, इफ देयर इज एनी अदर सेशन फाइन, इफ इट इज नॉट तो फिर उसी में जो भी एसेंशियल्स कर लेंगे और लेस इंपॉर्टेंट चीजें GIT की छोड़ देंगे। ठीक है ना?
जो 28 अक्टूबर को था ना, वो डॉक्टर उस्मान बशीर लेंगे ऑन रेस्पिरेशन।
दैट इज फाइन, दैट इज फाइन।
GIT आपको उनकी जगह आपको GIT दे दिया एंड 5th नवंबर को।
चलिए, अब नेक्स्ट क्लास इज ऑन 5th of November.
Okay, inshallah we'll meet on 5th November.
Inshallah. Thank you very much.